To start this podcast off, Jayson Tatum was talking about the 2025 NBA Finals matchup, and he said that it's going to be a rematch. We're going to play Dallas again. And I want to kind of take a look at both teams, where they stand in their conference, and how I think they would stack up in a rematch. Because, it does open conversation topics. Let's start with the Celtics. I think the East is going to be tougher than it has been in recent years because you've got a team like Milwaukee. This is their second year with Dame and Giannis. So now that duo kind of has had their time to build chemistry, because that first year, especially with the head coaching change, which I think was unjustified, with the head coaching change, a new coach coming in mid-season, and you also had a star player come in, and you lost a guy like Drew Holiday, that's going to affect your team, especially a star coming in at the point guard position. That just changes the whole dynamic of things. And Giannis had a real good year last year. Dame, not so much. He was technically an all-star starter, but, a lot of that comes down to fan vote. He's so popular. And he had a down year, especially efficiency-wise, and I think it's, for most people, not what we expected in the first year of that. But I think this year the Milwaukee Bucks will be a lot better. We saw it with the Minnesota Timberwolves this year past, where the first year where they make a huge change and bring in a guy like Rudy Gobert, that alters your whole scheme completely. And then they were able to turn that around. And the second year, they were a very good team that made it to the Western Conference Finals. I could see something like that happening to the Bucks. Honestly, I kind of expect that. I think we're a year too early with the Dame and Giannis hype. I think they need a year to work things out, and now also another offseason under new head coach Doc Rivers. I think the second year coming in, I think they will be a lot better right out the gate, and I think that will surprise a lot of people, and I think that success will continue. I think they could very well be the 2 or 3 seed. Who do I think? Obviously, the Celtics, I think, will be the 1 seed. I'll go into them in a second. But who do I think is going to be also in the running for that 2 to 3 seed? That would be the New York Knicks. They made what I really believe is a huge move, and it might not be that big on paper because Mikal Bridges, what he is best at is a role player, and that's why over in Brooklyn it didn't really work out because you asked him to be the first option, and Mikal isn't built to be the first option, but I think he's a perfect fit over in New York. Not only do you have chemistry over from college with guys like Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, but Mikal Bridges gets to be, say, the third option, behind Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. And that's where Mikal is going to thrive because we saw it over in Phoenix when he got to be behind a guy like D-Book. That's where he plays his best because he is not built to be your number one scoring option. He can maybe be your top scorer once a month, and you're okay with that. You don't want him being your top scoring option every night. So to have guys ahead of him like Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, that's going to open up his game a lot. The offense doesn't have to run through him, and he can focus more on defense because that wasn't as good as it usually is when he was playing for the Nets because he had to carry so much of the offensive load. So I think the addition of Mikal is going to be huge for the Knicks, and I think they will be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference along with the Milwaukee Bucks and Boston Celtics. But to talk about the Celtics for a little bit, because obviously that's the main thing with this topic, is I think they have all that they need to be able to go on another run this year. And obviously there's a talent of the roster. They also picked up Lonnie Walker, who I think is going to be a really good addition for them. But I want to talk about Jayson Tatum specifically, because a lot of the stuff with him in terms of, is he a superstar? Is he a borderline superstar? What is Tatum's spot in this league? Where does he rank among guys? A lot of the issue has been with his mentality and how maybe it doesn't always translate to having the best playoff games. He's definitely inconsistent in the playoffs. You can say what you want about his performance. He's undoubtedly inconsistent. And I think Tatum is going to be he's going to be motivated this year because Jaylen Brown, he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He won Finals MVP. So I think while people are going to say, yes, this is obviously Jayson Tatum's team, and I think to me it really showed that he was a superstar because he was able to contribute to winning basketball without being the top scorer on the team. I think Tatum is going to take a leap and have that mentality this year because he's going to want to prove to himself that he is the number one option on this team and can be the number one scoring option on a championship team. Because really, in the NBA, if you're going to succeed, all the players that succeed, they've got a little bit of ego. So there's nothing wrong in saying that Jayson Tatum is going to need to have a little bit of ego and say, hey, I'm the number one guy on this team. Let me go out, let me get some buckets, and let me prove that to not just myself, but to my team and to everyone watching us. And I think Tatum, I'm hoping at the very least that he's going to be able to tap into that. And really, I would love to see the Celtics repeat with Tatum winning Finals MVP this time. That's just wishful thinking, really. But I would like to see a mentality shift, and I think it's very possible. One more team I want to talk about in the Eastern Conference before we move over to the West, and the Dallas Mavericks, is the Orlando Magic. They were a very young team last year. They're the 4 seed, or they were the 5 seed. I think they're going to be the 4 seed this year. That's just another year to develop. Markel's not coming back. They're going to have Cole Anthony lead in the front. I think he was my pick for most improved. I mentioned that in my interview with OKC Access. I think Cole Anthony is going to be a very, very good point guard this year. And ultimately, he's a little bit more of a scorer. But that's okay because you've got a little bit of a scoring need. You've got solid guys like Franz, like obviously Paul Banchero, Jalen Suggs, but really a solidified second option, that's probably Franz. But a third, you could have Cole Anthony in that slot, and I think he can do very well. His efficiency has gone up. That's always been the biggest knock on him, but it has been better in the past couple of years. I think Cole Anthony is primed to break out, and the Magic, I think, could very well be the 4 seed this year, just another year for his young team to develop chemistry, and I think Paul could very well make an All-NBA leap as well. Moving over to the West, I think the Dallas Mavericks will have their hands a little bit fuller than the Celtics. Do I think Celtics are going to have some competition, as I just talked about? Yes, but ultimately I think they're going to make the finals again, and I could very well see them winning it. But for Dallas, this Western Conference, that's the conference that has generally been the toughest and had the most competition. I don't think that's going to change. Let's start by talking about Denver. I think the loss of KCP is going to be pretty big because that team was perfectly constructed for the modern NBA because he had a solid point guard. You had an elite role player shooting guard. You had a lights-out shooter from 3. You had Aaron Gordon, who has the best two-man game with the most unique offensive weapon we've ever seen, Jokic. So overall, that team works so well together, 1 through 5, and I think the loss of KCP is really going to affect their rhythm, at least in the earlier parts of the year. I think Denver will ultimately be fine and be a top team in the West again, but I think they might have some struggles starting off. OKC, I think it's going to be really good. I think J-Dub could very well take another leap. He was really good last year, averaged, I believe, 19 points. Maybe take a little bit of that scoring load off of SGA. I think him and Chet could do that. SGA, he might average 30 again. He very well could, but he might not because he might not need to. You might have a guy like Chet or J-Dub or some other guys come in and take that scoring load off of him. And I think that would ultimately be better for the health of that team, for the health of Shea, although he's been consistently pretty healthy. I think just having a more well-rounded offense would do wonders for them, and just another year with that team, I think that could very well happen. So OKC is going to be an even stronger team, even deeper team this year, especially with a guy like Cason Wallace. He's coming into his second year, so he's only going to be better. I think this team is going to be deeper and better than ever. Last team I want to touch on before talking about the Dallas Mavericks is the Minnesota Timberwolves, because that was the team they faced in the Western Conference Finals last year. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves, I don't know that they're going to take a leap again, and I don't think they need to, because they were a very good team last year. They had one of the best defenses we've seen in recent memory, and I think that's just going to continue. And maybe the cookie crumbles a different way this year, and they're able to have a little bit more success. And in a rematch against the Mavericks, maybe in the Western Conference Finals, they can say, hey, we're going to go to the finals this year. I say that like, it's all a mentality thing, because really it just comes down to talent. But Anthony Edwards, he's going to have another year, and he's a playoff riser. And guys like Cat, he had a really solid series last year. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves, they can compete with anyone in that Western Conference and really the NBA. So I think the fact that the Dallas Mavericks 1-5 last year, that was really surprising to me, and I think the Minnesota Timberwolves will be back and better than ever. Do I think they're going to take a leap? No, because I think they're going to be just as solid as they usually are. And lastly, for the Dallas Mavericks, I think just having another year Kyrie and look, I say another year for all these teams, but really, it does help to build chemistry. And this is Derek Lively's sophomore year; he'll only be better. And that's a really good center rotation. The glow up is crazy. You go from Dwight Powell to having Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. That's really good for them. And I wasn't high on the Mavericks. I've never been a huge Luka guy because generally the team success hasn't been there. The team success has been lacking. But now I can't say anything. He's proved me wrong. Luka's a playoff riser. He's always going to be in MVP talks just off his insane production alone. Kyrie is one of the best second options in the entire league. A top 4 shooting guard, I would say. You've got D-Mitch and D-Book and then Kyrie. So, and that wasn't in any order, by the way. But yeah, generally I think that the Dallas Mavericks, they have what it takes for sure, and I doubted them in years past. I can't do that anymore. They've shown they have what it takes, and I could very well see them make it to the Western Conference Finals and the Finals again. And, if they had a rematch with Celtics, maybe they could win. I think the Celtics are going to win it again this year, but the Mavericks could very well be in those conversations and could very well win. It's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. If you enjoyed this video, it would be great if you could find it in you to like, subscribe, maybe check out the full podcast on Spotify. Follow us on there. Follow us on Instagram. I know realistically this podcast isn't going to go anywhere ultimately, whether it's via the segments on YouTube or the entire podcast itself. But I want to get into the sports broadcasting business. I want to be able to promote thought-provoking discussions about the NBA, and I would love to do it via State of the Association. Thank you if you made it all the way through.